Moors.
What's up, everybody? This is Rebel, and I want to talk to you about black nobility, because black nobility is melanated people that is from Africa, and what it stands for is a society within an elite society. And what this is these are the richest people in the world, and they run the world, and they are melanated people from Africa. They're called blackamoors, and they're in Europe, and they're still running Europe. This is why when you go to Europe, you see a lot of melanated statues, because this is who is really in charge. But we're taught that white people is in charge, but that is not true. White people is the front man, but they're not in charge of anything. This is why when you see Queen Elizabeth and the Pope, which is quote unquote two important people, they always kissing the feet of Africans, and we never understood that. Let me show you something. You remember this photo right here. And remember that this woman, she had on a brooch. This was when Prince Harry was about to get married. And remember that infamous brooch she had on. And people were saying, oh, she was trying to be racist. No, she had to cover it up, and she had to go along with her. She had to apologize because she didn't want you to know the truth, that she was paying homage to the blackamoors, which is the black nobility. She was paying homage to them. See, they are in control of everything, and still is in control, and they shun publicity because they don't want you to know what's really going on. It's melanated people like yourself that's in control of everything, but we're told not to never look at it in that sense. These people right here is the people that met us, that came to America, and they met us. These people right here. Those people right there. Those are the people came that met us. Those are the people that got off the Mayflower. This is why it's a lot of stories of melanated people that had all kind of slaves. It was the blackamoors that came over here. They set up shop, and they're infiltrated in our families. They try to hide who they are because they don't want you to know. These are very wealthy people that have gotten wealthy off of the indigenous people, that have gotten wealthy off of these indigenous people, have gotten wealthy off of us, because we don't know the truth of what's really going on. And they constantly have us looking at this white man, and no, the white man don't have the power. The blackamoors have the power, and that's who's in power right now. But they hide themselves, and the reason why they hide themselves is because they have to make you think that they don't have any power. This is why you see these pictures right here. This is why you see him kissing their feet. That's the black.
Have you heard of the Moors? No? What if I told you that they are responsible for making Europe and America what they are today? They don't want you to know that. See, the Moors ruled most of the Iberian Peninsula for the 8th century, and they brought things like mathematics, sciences, architecture, agriculture, art, science, basically everything that we consider modern day Europe. But that's supposed to be a secret. They are actually the ones that are responsible for bringing Europe out of the Dark Ages and into the Renaissance. But again, you're not supposed to know that. Meanwhile, while the Christian Europe had an illiteracy rate of 99% and 0 universities and 0 libraries, Moors, they had 17 universities in 7 cities and over 70 libraries. And then they introduced their education system to Europe. There was a man called Ziryab. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he was a Moor, and he actually pioneered changing clothes based on the season. That's how dumb Europeans were at the time. They didn't even... What? He also invented deodorant, daily bathing, and invented toothpaste. Like, no wonder the Black Plague destroyed Europe. They were filthy. Ziryab also introduced a 3-course meal. Soup, main course, dessert. And the Moors, they even introduced crops that are still prominent in Spain today. Moorish cities also had streetlights, hospitals, and running water. And streetlights and paved streets weren't even introduced in London and Paris for another couple hundred years. Moors are also the ones that built the aqueducts that brought running water from the mountains down to the cities, which gave Europe running water. The father of modern surgery was also a Moor, named Al-Zawrawi. Don't know if I'm saying that right either, I'm sorry. He developed innovative and precise surgical equipment and the premier textbook of Western medical training. Oh, and I bet you thought that the Wright brothers were the ones that are responsible for inventing flight. Nope. Furness, again, sorry if I pronounced it wrong, but he was the first one to actually attempt flight scientifically, and he was actually successful. The only thing he wasn't successful on was the landing. And those are just a few of the ways that the Moorish people completely changed Europe. But
people of African descent have likely been living part and parcel with European society for a great deal longer than modern scholarship chooses to recognise in all strata of European society, from common folk to their nobility, as neighbours, as equals, as rulers. A legacy of the near 800 years of Moorish domination in southern Europe, who, while conquerors in the south, lived alongside their European neighbours, integrating and travelling northward, or southwards as the ancient Egyptians would have viewed it, beyond the occupied territories. Marrying into Christianity, being baptised and adopting Moorish names, originally black families whose indigenous African genes have been absorbed into the white majority populace of Europe, whose white descendants are still carrying them to this day. This hypothesis is ripe and ready for further research, hopefully to be carried out in full force, but for now one thing remains established fact, that the Moorish conquest of southern Europe had a revolutionary impact on European culture and society, carrying the legacy of North African high culture, itself a legacy of ancient Egypt's North African influence, and carrying those intellectual cultural traditions into Europe, creating a distinctly African culture in the civilization of the Moors, the eventual dissolution of which in the late 15th century fall of Moorish civilization likely spurred the European Renaissance that carried those intellectual traditions into the 21st century of our modern era. A dissolution of Moorish civilization, as highlighted by Robin Walker by the likes of King Manuel of Portugal, who upon entering Granada, alongside his wife Isabella as its new rulers at the twilight of the Moorish Empire, ordered the expulsion of its African population. The expulsions from both lands continued up until the time of King Philip III, who completed the policy in 1609. It is stated, wrote Professor Lane Poole, that no less than 3 million Moors were banished between the fall of Granada and the first decade of the 17th century. Some returned to North and West Africa, but others fled elsewhere in Europe, where they were gradually absorbed. Professor Lane Poole commented upon the sagaciousness of the expulsion policies. In 1492, the last bulwark of the Moors gave way before the crusade of Ferdinand and Isabella, and with Granada fell Spain's greatness. For a brief while indeed, the reflection of the Moorish splendour cast a borrowed light upon the history of the land which it had warmed with its sunny radiance. The great epoch of Isabella, Charles V and Philip II, of Columbus, Cortes and Pizarro shed a last halo about the dying moments of a mighty state. Then followed the abomination of desolation, the rule of the Inquisition, and the blackness of darkness in which Spain had been plunged ever since. In the land where science was once supreme, the Spanish doctors became noted for nothing but their ignorance and incapacity, and the discoveries of Newton and Harvey were condemned as pernicious to the faith. Where once sedentary public libraries had fed the minds of scholars, and 500,000 books had been gathered together at Cordova for the benefit of the world, such indifference to learning afterwards prevailed. The new capital, Madrid, possessed no public library in the 18th century, and even the manuscripts of the Escurial were denied in our own days, 1886, to the first scholarly historian of the Moors, though himself a Spaniard. The 16,000 looms of Seville soon dwindled to a fifth of their ancient number. The arts and the industries of Toledo and Almeria faded into insignificance. Their very baths, public buildings of equal ornament and use, were destroyed because their cleanliness savoured too strongly of rank infidelity. The land, deprived of the skillful irrigation of the Moors, grew impoverished and neglected. The richest and most fertile valleys languished and were deserted. Most of the populous cities, which filled every district of Andalusia, fell.
Moors, the black nobility.
I did say she had more blood, Mum.
You did not say she would be that brown.
But I did say she had more blood.
Very brown. Thoughts?
It is a problem. People will talk.
People will talk. It is a problem.
We have already made...
Moors,
She
the
is
black
very brown.
nobility.
Hey, bro, come on now,
Okay,
dog.
so you understand. So this is Queen Elizabeth bloodline. This is where it become more. It start because they start to mix the genes. They start to mix with the Slavs, the Slavics, the Slovakians. Then the nobility bloodline start to be mixed because most of them so-called swarthy people from all over Europe, they was going to different areas. So from conquering different areas, so they start to settle in different areas. And from different areas, they start mixing their blood. They start having kids with Slavics. They start having kids with Slovakians. They start having kids with a bunch of other groups. And these children, they're about to inherit the throne. These are the children they call the bastard children. That means the outside kids from outside outposts. Game of Thrones show you this shit perfectly. I explained this countless of times. All of these houses in Game of Thrones, this is pretty much all the conquering areas from these so-called Moors, or from these so-called, the extension of the empires of the, Roman Empire extension. So they was expanding their territory. So by doing that, they start having kids with them. And these children inherit the power. That's how it is. It was never, they just fuck you, they kids, they go. No. It's what you call transferring of power. So when you see Queen Elizabeth have her hair up, she trying to tell you and trying to honor her
lived in
bloodline.
various European countries. However, when you research about them, you will find even the most credible sources showing them as white. The paintings and historical records suggest that all European queens and princesses were white. But the truth is quite the opposite. Today we know that various European women aristocrats, princesses, and queens were black, which you should know about. In this video we will tell you how Europe hid its history and whitewashed it by showing the black women of nobility as white. Watch the video until the very end, because
let's dive into a few of them. First up, Peyton Randolph of Virginia. He was lawyer. Before becoming president of the First Continental Congress, Randolph served as a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses and as the state's attorney general. He was unanimously elected to the office of congressional president, and he served 2 terms. He was a good friend of George Washington and a first cousin once removed of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson didn't consider Randolph fit for leadership, saying, "He was indeed a most excellent man, but heavy and inert in body. He was rather too indolent and careless for business." Thomas said Randolph was an important addition to the Congress because of his reputation as a political moderate. Randolph served in the Continental Congress 3 times between 1774 and 1775 and was president twice. Ill health forced his resignation in 1775, and he died later that year while dining with Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia the night after a congressional meeting. Congress paused their proceedings to show their respect at his funeral. Could it be that they finished him off because he was a dark-skinned Moorish brother? They say his death was due to a cerebral brain hemorrhage. They made him white in the history books. Next, Henry Middleton from South Carolina, a South Carolinian. Henry Middleton, a dark-skinned Moor, stepped in as the second president. Middleton was one of the largest landowners in South Carolina. He owned some 50,000 acres near Charleston, and he held some 800 white slaves or indentured servants, according to an article about him in the Dictionary of American Biography. Despite some similarities to enslavement, indentured servants ultimately attained their freedom once they completed their contract, while enslaved people were permanently denied their freedom unless they could obtain the means to purchase themselves or successfully escape. Most of all of these enslaved people were really POW, who were native to Turtle Island. White servitude was one of the major institutions in the economy and society of early colonial British America. In fact, more than half of all the white immigrants to the British colonies sold themselves into bondage for a period of years in order to migrate to the New World. Before the Revolution, he served as a justice of the peace and as a member of the Commons House of Assembly. Middleton, a delegate to the First Continental Congress, served as president after Randolph fell ill. Like many in South Carolina, he opposed declaring independence from Great Britain and resigned from the Second Continental Congress just a few months before the Declaration of Independence was adopted. He returned home, and in 1776, he and his son, Arthur, served on the committee that wrote a temporary constitution for South Carolina. Middleton was captured during the Siege of Charleston and accepted, becoming a British subject again, according to the South Carolina Encyclopedia. Because of his history as a patriot, he wasn't penalized as so many loyalists were after the war. They made him white in the history books. John Hancock, a name we all know, was the third president, famous for his bold signature on the Declaration of Independence. Hancock was a key figure in the Revolution and served until 1777. Keep in mind, John Hanson was a brother. Might I add, all the dark-skinned brothers were Freemason? So, if there were no so-called Black Masons until Prince Hall, what lodge was these 8 brothers a part of? I'm just saying. Prince Hall received his Masonic chapter, known as African Lodge number 459, on September 29th, 1784. African Lodge number 459 is key here, showing you that there was 458 African lodges before Prince Hall Lodge. Not to mention, this must have been called Africa Doing 1784. They're right. It wasn't any black men lodges back then, because black people, the label, wasn't applied until later. But anyway, John Hancock probably is the most familiar name of all 14. He served as the 3rd president of the Continental Congress. Graduating from Harvard at age 17, Hancock worked as a young man in his family's mercantile business, according to the National Constitution Center. Hancock was among those who took part in the Boston Tea Party, where dirty Moors dressed up like Native American and dumped tea into the ocean. John Hancock also duped the British into believing 10,000 armed colonists were ready to march on Boston if they didn't evacuate the city. During the war, he helped organize the Navy and raise money to pay for the war. Hancock was named president when Middleton declined permanent election to the position in 1775, and he served until 1777. Hancock was still president of the Continental Congress when the Declaration of Independence was adopted. According to legend, Hancock put such a large signature on the document so that King George III could read his name without putting on his glasses. They made him white in the history books. Henry Lawrence, the 4th president, signed the Articles of Confederation and later negotiated the Treaty of Paris. His journey included imprisonment in the Tower of London. Henry Lawrence was a dark-skinned Moor. He served in the Second Continental Congress from November 1777 to December 1778 and was one of the men who signed the Articles of Confederation. Lawrence was a rice planter, merchant, and white slave trader who owned the largest white slave trading house in North America. In 1780, he was commissioned to travel to Holland to negotiate a treaty. and alone, but he was captured by the British Navy and taken to London, where he was imprisoned in the Tower and sentenced to be beheaded as a traitor, according to an article about him at the Library of Congress's website. Lawrence served 14 brutal months and was finally released in exchange for Lord Cornwallis during a prisoner exchange after the Battle of Yorktown. He would serve as one of the diplomats who negotiated the Treaty of Paris, which officially ended the Revolutionary War. They made him white in the history books. John Jay, the 5th president, became the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and was instrumental in foreign affairs. He also helped pass a gradual emancipation bill in New York. John Jay, the New Yorker, who would become the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was the 5th president of the Continental Congress. He served from December 1778 to September 1779, author of 5 Federalist Papers. He was the first Secretary of Foreign Affairs, equivalent of today's Secretary of State. Jay also was a slave owner, though he did succeed in getting a gradual emancipation bill passed during his term as New York governor. He also founded the New York Manumission Society. Jay had freed all but one of his slaves by 1810, according to that year's census. Samuel Huntington, the 6th president, oversaw the adoption of the Articles of Confederation. Some historians even consider him the first president of the United States. Samuel Huntington was elected 6th president of the Continental Congress in 1779. He was said to be a brilliant legal mind, despite being entirely self-educated. The Articles of Confederation became the ruling law during his term, so some historians refer to Huntington as the first president of the United States. Huntington died in 1796 while serving as governor of Connecticut. Thomas McKean served as the 7th president of the Continental Congress from July to November 1781. A Pennsylvania native, he moved to Delaware to study law, and he represented that state in the 2 Continental Congresses. Interestingly, McKean was a Delaware congressman. At the same time, he served as Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. McKean was a signer of the Articles of Confederation. The forgotten first president, John Hanson. John Hanson was a Nubian man, Moor, a so-called black man. They made him white in history. Plus, to make fun of us, they shot the hidden hand in the picture, letting you know what a hidden agenda. Like we said, George Washington was not actually the first president of the United States. That's right, folks. Today, I'm going to tell you about a man named John Hanson, the real first president under the Articles of Confederation. John Hanson, a Marylander, born in 1721, was the first president of the United States in Congress assembled, serving from November 5th, 1781 to November 3rd, 1782. This was before the Constitution and before the presidential powers as we know them today. Hanson's role was largely ceremonial, but he was pivotal in holding the young nation together. Hanson's accomplishments were impressive. He established the first consular service, the post office department, and chartered a national bank. He also adopted a uniform system of coinage, made progress towards the first census, and signed a treaty with Holland. Plus, he signed all laws, regulations, official papers, and letters, and established the presidential seal. Under the Articles of Confederation, the national government was weak, and the states retained significant power. Hanson's leadership helped navigate these challenges during a fragile time for the new nation. He was chosen unanimously by Congress, which included figures like George Washington, a testament to his influence and leadership. But Hanson's presidency wasn't easy. The troops from the Revolutionary War demanded to be paid, and with no funds available, they threatened to overthrow the new government. Hanson managed to calm the troops and hold the country together, preventing what could have been a disaster. Hanson also ordered all foreign troops off American soil and removed all foreign flags, asserting the new nation's sovereignty. He established the Great Seal of the United States, a symbol still used today, and created key departments like the Treasury, War, and Foreign Affairs. And let's not forget, he declared the fourth Thursday of every November as Thanksgiving Day. Despite his significant contributions, Hanson and the other presidents under the Articles are often forgotten. The Articles of Confederation were eventually replaced by the Constitution due to their ineffectiveness, leading to the stronger central government we know today. So, while George Washington was the first president under the Constitution, John Hanson deserves recognition as the first president of the United States in Congress assembled. Elias Boudinot was the 9th president of the Continental Congress. He was born in Pennsylvania and grew up as a neighbor of Benjamin Franklin's. Boudinot helped finance the Revolutionary War and also supported the work of American spies during the Revolution. He served as director of the U.S. Mint from 1795 to 1805. According to the Museum of the American Revolution, Boudinot was an advocate for women's rights and led a campaign in 1793 to encourage women to participate in New Jersey state politics. Boudinot founded the American Bible Society in 1816 and served as its president until 1821. The 10th president was Thomas Mifflin, a Pennsylvanian who also served as a major general and the first quartermaster general in the Continental Army and a delegate to the Constitutional Convention. Washington lost confidence in Mifflin, though, in a controversy over money management in the Quartermaster's Corps. But Mifflin would be the man to whom the great general delivered his resignation in 1783. Richard Henry Lee was the 11th president of the Continental Congress. A Virginian, Lee had protested the 1765 Stamp Act, was a member of the committee that named Washington Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, and also was the congressional delegate who introduced the motion that resulted in the Declaration of Independence. The resolution read, in part, that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. He called for a Declaration of Independence, the formation of foreign alliances, and a plan for confederation. According to the document, which is available at the National Archives website, the Continental Congress created 3 committees to study each of Lee's proposals. Action on the latter 2 was postponed until the fall, but members approved the call for a Declaration of Independence on July 2nd, 1776. The 12th president was Massachusetts businessman Nathaniel Gorham, who was elected when John Hancock could not fulfill his second presidential term. He served from 1786 to 1787. Gorham was a signer of the Constitution. Gorham was among the first to oppose the British during the Stamp Act crisis in 1765. Arthur St. Clair served as the 13th president and presided over the Confederation Congress. Born in Scotland, He was the first governor of the Northwest Territory. A military man, St. Clair came to America as a soldier in the French and Indian War. He resigned his commission in 1762, and by the mid-1770s, St. Clair thought of himself as more American than British. Following the Revolutionary War and his time in the Northwest Territory, St. Clair was commissioned a major general and named commander of the U.S. Army. Finally, the 14th president was Cyrus Griffin of Virginia, a protege of George Washington. It was during Griffin's term as president that the Constitution was finalized. He served as president from January 1788 until Washington was inaugurated in 1789. Washington appointed Griffin the first U.S. District Judge in 1790 and served until his death in 1810. Griffin served on the U.S. Court of Appeals, and in that capacity was one of the judges who presided over Aaron Burr's treason trial. So there you have it, folks.
This is going to change how you think about European royal families.
The Moor Science Temple teachings came by the way of the Shriners or the Masonic Lodge, which Noble Drew Ali was enrolled in. Noble Drew Ali used their symbolism, the star and crescent, their handshake of unity as the Masonic grip, the red fez of Mansory and the term adept for his followers. Noble Drew Ali was a Mason as well as a Shriner, because Noble Drew Ali was a Mason of such a high degree. It was only natural that the symbols of Masonry were so heavily incorporated into his teachings as mentioned earlier. He accepted many customs and symbols from the Masonic Lodge, which is a pseudo-religious fraternity. Noble Drew Ali also borrowed the name Noble and other customs and symbols from the Shriners, which is a secret fraternity that was designed for the Amorite cave dwellers in mockery of the island Ellen Bay. Noble Drew Ali uniforms were also taken from Masonry as well as how he positioned his feet. There are many different degrees or steps that one can advance to. The degree that a person is advanced to is dignified by the position of the feet. This position in Masonry is called standing on a square, which is the angle of 90 to the power of 0. Even when you see Noble Drew Ali putting his hands on his bosom, that's influenced by Masonry. It symbolizes the same thing according to the book Richardson Monitor of Freemasonry. This is supposed to be an imitation of when Allah commanded Moses to thrust his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out it became a lepose. The fez is the headdress worn by the Shriners. The fez was one of the 4 traditional capitals of Morocco and a great Islamic center of learning. The fez represents the supreme height of wisdom and practical knowledge of the science of 12 zodiac signs. The sash, on the other hand, is a Masonic apron known as a badge of dignity. Noble Drew Ali wore his apron on the side of his body in the manner of the Shriners. By doing this he violated the Shriners' code, because the apron's supposed to be in the front not the side. He also violated the code by revealing the secrets that was taught to him by Masons and Shriners. Noble Drew Ali taught the Nubian man and woman to be proud of their African identity and to trade in their culture of America for the culture of the Moors. He referred to Nubians as Moors because he believed that slaves in America were taken from Morocco in Northeast Africa. For this reason he called his congregation Moorish Amer. The Moor Science Temple teachings came by the way of the Shriners or the Masonic